Hello, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the TopCyberPro podcast. I'm founder and CEO Jim West. I'm here with another great guest who's worn a lot of hats in a 30 plus year career. She's worn the former Department of Air Force Chief Information Officer. She's also a former U.S. Department of Agriculture Chief Information Security Officer. She's also a board advisor to multiple organizations, and she's held lots of hats and titles and responsibilities through her 30 plus career. And without further ado, we have Miss Venus Goodwine. Welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast.
Thank you, Jim. Great to be here today. Looking forward to our discussion.
So I know I named a lot of titles there, but most important of all, she's also a speaker. But more important than all those titles, she's also a veteran, and I definitely want to say thank you for your service. And going from being in uniform to transitioning to the civilian world, still working for the government, it's a very admirable thing, when you go from serving your country and then still serving your country, 30 years. Wow. Does it seem like it's a blur at this point? I mean, not to say that you're done by any means, because if I read your post recently, you said you're just taking a break. So what can we expect in the near future, to continue this wonderful career you've built over the years?
Well, hey, Jim, thank you for that question. So, no, you're right. I'm not done. I'm calling this my chapter three. I've had the pleasure, as you know, from wearing the uniform and now, moving to the senior executive service. And so now my role is to continue to contribute to the nation in the way that I know how, my knowledge of what the warfighter needs, whether it's airmen or guardians. And also, I can add to that Marine Corps and soldiers because I've worked for all of the services. Fun fact. And so I'm excited to continue this in my next chapter and phase of my life.
hmm And you've worked for so many organizations. I mean, 30 years is a tremendous amount of time. So, has there been one organization when you look back at those 3 plus decades? When you look back, has there been one organization that's always near and dear to your heart when you look back at the memories of when you served in that organization?
Listen, to be honest, everyone will tell you, I think, command. Serving in command as at Westover Air Reserve Base was the highlight. You grow a lot as a leader when you have the opportunity to serve in command. And I did that. I had highs, I had lows, we had great successes and lots of lessons learned. And so when I look back over my career, yes, that was a specific special time for me. Now, granted, being the CIO for the Department of the Air Force and Space Force, I mean, come on, that's pretty nice too, right?
hmm
Knowing that the decisions that I was making had a direct impact on the war fighter. So yes, that role was great, and not because it was my most recent role, but it was the culmination of all my other roles. Because
hmm
throughout my career, I started in industry. Another fun fact, that's where I started working for a company, Silicon Graphics, out in California. And then as I moved from, no kidding, being a system support engineer, walking around with a toolkit, fixing crate computers, fixing SGI computers, making sure multiprocessor machines worked. I worked in the high performance computing center at NASA, at Stennis Space Center. My apologies. That was exciting. And then as I moved throughout my career, yes, all of those things were definitely exciting. But I will tell you, command was the most rewarding. But culminating my career after all that I've done was also an exciting time as well.
So you mentioned, as the CIO for the Department of Air Force, you got to have a lot of impact and influence over, particularly the realm of emerging technologies, and that's one of the big challenges that defense is facing is to embrace the speed of which these emerging technologies are coming at us, as well as to kind of make sure that we approach it securely and very pragmatically. So one of the things you had to have a lot of influences over is particularly in artificial intelligence and AI. And so one of the big projects for the Air Force is Nipper GPT. So could you speak a little bit about how that came about and some of the stories that surrounded that journey in that project?
Well, I will tell you, I will not take full credit for Nipper GPT. I will give that to Alexis Bonnell and her team. They saw a vision that I had for the department. If you looked at the CIO strategy, they leveraged that vision and created a need. at the time, when AI really, let me be clear, when large language models, ChatGPT came on scene, it was important that the department, Air Force and Space Force, take advantage of that technology and understand how to use it. And so that started first with what we call AI literacy. Before that ever kicked off, we ensured that everyone understood how to interact with the tool in a secure manner. And then beyond that, the real purpose of Nipper GPT was an experiment so that we can understand the human to machine connection. And so the AFRL team, Air Force Research Laboratory team,
Hmm.
they took that and tested multiple models behind this moniker of Nipper GPT so that we would understand again, that human to user, the human to machine interaction, understanding the types of questions that were being asked, understanding the use cases that could be developed as a result of that, understanding the cost of AI, meaning the tokenization, understand the requirements for compute. And if you can go on and on, because we all know AI itself is not new. We've done AI for a while, but this specific generative AI is really what's capturing a lot of us. And as you move to agentic AI and all the other things, for me as a CIO, it was important that I put this capability in the hands of airmen and guardians so that they can use it safely. And that's what really Nipper GPT was aimed at, really for us to understand again that human to machine connection. And then we could start to understand the thinking behind those that will use these tools and then understand how it would help them in their individual roles. Never intended to take the place of any human, but we had discussions around what does it mean in an AI world to have human in the loop or human on the loop when you think about AI. And then lastly, I'll touch on if you're going to enter into AI, and this was the thinking in my head as a CIO, is there are a couple of conversations you must have. One, you'd have to understand your data. And
Hmm.
that's why the use cases matter because you cannot try and fix all data. And so we wanted to identify specific use cases so that we can, clean the data or narrate the data for that particular use case. The other conversation you'd have to have is around the investment. And what are you willing to invest or what do you need to invest in order to capitalize on this technology? And then the last thing is the people aspect of it. There's a psychological safety that you'd have to think about when you introduce AI into the workplace, especially now when you're thinking about putting AI on the org chart, right?
Yeah.
How do I then assign really the expectations for the AI? How do we manage that relationship between the humans on the org chart and the machines? And so that's just a really quick overview of how I viewed Nipper GPT and what AFRL was doing to bring that capability to the warfighters.
So, other than just the security aspect, what were some other discussions that you're at liberty to speak about in regards? Because I know, like with a couple of folks that I've talked to with MITRE a few years ago, there was a lot of concern still about we hear the term guardrails that we're going
Mhm.
to restrict or prohibit the systems from going outside of these guardrails, or
Yeah.
things like ethics and morals and other questions that come up with responsible LLM and AI development.
Yeah, we've always had a structure for responsible AI in the department. There's an entire governance body around autonomy and AI-enabled autonomy that is owned by the Department of Defense or OSD or Department of War. My apologies. Let me correct myself. We've already had that, but when we think about anytime our airmen and guardians are going to use any technology, new or old, we always have to think about the worst case scenario. What's that break glass scenario? Because humans will do human tricks, right? They will push capabilities to their end and push it to their limit. And so we wanted to make sure we put the right guardrails in place. Simple things that we always do. You put banners so that we continually remind individuals when you use this system, understand the purpose of the system and the data that is authorized, to transmit or store, or we make sure we put banners so they understand, don't put your PII
Hmm.
here. We understood that in the technology that we work with our cloud service providers, even that we understood the guardrails around making sure that we would have our, our RAG database or our CAG database, those databases that we could really not rely on the answers from, the generative AI because of hallucination. So there are a lot of things we put in place to make this technology safe. And as you know, it's really progressed since ChatGPT first came out. There are so many different models you can use, and even in an agentic perspective. So the cybersecurity is always key. But at the end of the day, cybersecurity is around protection of the data. And
Hmm.
so we always, at first, we erred on the side of caution. And then we said to let our users have this capability so that we can also understand how this capability could then be used. Because the key point in using AI, rather it's us using it in this format, or we have tools that are AI enabled by a lot of our service providers, is to understand if I'm going to save any man hours or any human hours, not man, but any human hours or any FTEs, I want to also have an opportunity to reinvest those savings. And so really, in my case, so I can deliver capabilities back to the warfighter.
Wonderful. And that was not the only emergent technology and innovations that you worked with. There were some other projects, particularly Zero Trust, which is, another one of these buzzwords that's been really strong in the past 2 to 3 years. So, and then also ICAM, which is Identity Credentialed Access Management. So, can you speak a little bit about those initiatives and those programs?
Yeah. And so zero trust, of course, came out of requirement from, the federal government. And then, of course, we in Department of War adhered to that. And really the idea is when we started, COVID, I think was the first indication for sure that we had extended our boundary besides what we consider to be in the walls,
Hmm.
of in the Pentagon or in some base or installation or, some Delta location. And so when that happened, we recognized that we needed to think about security in a different way, because now we need to secure at the data layer and not necessarily just at the perimeter, because now you're in a perimeterless
Hmm.
environment. And so the old ways of doing things for security perspective were not going to be sufficient. You all know we moved from the castle and moat to, um, technology mindset where you put all your crown jewels in one place and then you protected everything around it. Where my crown jewels now were everywhere because COVID pushed everyone at home and people still needed to work. So how do I put things in place, or put a structure in place, or put technology in place that has still allowed them to work but still allow the protection? And that's where zero trust really is worth its weight in gold. And what I mean by that is because now with zero trust, even from an Air Force perspective, as a CIO, yes, I signed our first zero trust strategy that was approved by the zero trust PMO office. And really, as we went to implement that through all of our installations, it was important because we all had to do a culture shift on what that meant. And that
Yeah.
meant a culture shift for our operators and how they would defend the data, and not just the network, not just your nipper and zipper and any flavor thereof, but really focusing on the data itself. And so understanding how data was moving throughout the network and then tagging data, which goes back to the AI problem, right? You
Hmm.
want to make sure you know the data that you have and you know the level of protection that required. And so now I can just assign your permissions based on, or your access to data based on who you are, where you are, and what you do. And so that was important. And so that's why zero trust was, I think, a success for us in the Air Force. And we still have a way to go because zero trust is a journey and not a destination,
Yeah.
right? Because threats change every day. And the threat actor, will think of new ways to exploit vulnerabilities. And so we have to make sure that we have multiple ways to put up countermeasures to address all of those different threats. The other thing, so of course, part of Zero Trust was ICAM. And so our CTO at the time, Jay Bonsi, started to initiate our ICAM strategy, in which he did as a as a CTO. And but that fed, not only the Zero Trust, but it also fed our responsibility to our audit called the FIRE, our financial improvement and audit readiness, which is a goal for the Department of the War to get a clean audit. And so ICAM was a big piece of that. And again, it started to understand not only just having role-based access to particular data or particular assets.
Of the
It
context
became
space.
very important that we understood individual and who they are and what they really needed access to. But you have to be able to do that, in a dynamic way and not in a static way.
Mhm.
And so that's what both Zero Trust ICAM helped us to do. But I will tell you, it prepped us for what we're doing now in AI.
It's interesting when we see these digital transformations where you could have convergence of technologies when technologies come together and create wonderful opportunities for
Mm-hmm.
innovation, or when we see a complete transformation. As you mentioned, the old mindset was the
Mm-hmm.
castle in the moat with the whole
Yes.
perimeter defense and putting everything in the vault to, like you said, every data being everywhere now. And so we have to now transform the way we approach it. And so, like RBAC, role-based asset control, we had like the
Yes.
buckets, the OUs, the groups, and the labels that would give
Yes.
someone their permissions and rights in this bucket. To now going into what now is CBAC, a context-based access control.
Yep.
Which the wonderful thing about context, as you said already, things can change. Users, their roles can change. The situation, the context in which they operate can change. And so, CBAC is now one of the great access control approaches now, which is one of the components of a zero trust strategy. And like you said, zero trust as a strategy or architecture, it's constantly evolving and being built and changing. So wonderful. Um, is there any of these other innovations, initiatives that you could share with us that you got to work on? Because these are the big buzzwords. But was there anything else that you said? You know what? I was a champion for this, and hopefully this is this impact will to be the seen, or hopefully will have a lasting impact upon Department of Air Force.
Well, two things that come to mind when you ask me that question. One is we can't forget quantum because cryptology and encryption is very important. So I had a chief information security officer that led us along that journey and was very key in working with some of our other organizations to make sure that we understood the impact of quantum, to be, quantum ready or quantum resilient or any of those words around quantum. So we were definitely engaged in those conversations. But the other thing I think that less technical but very relevant is people. The other role I had besides being the CIO was I also was the what we call functional manager, responsible for the day-to-day strategy for the civilians that are in cyber and IT. More than 12,000 of them in Air Force and Space Force. And I had a team that helped me understand how we're going to identify, recruit, train, and retain our cyber and IT, because that is definitely a skill set that we need more of. We need more individuals interested in doing cybersecurity. And I know yourself, you are very credentialed. And so that's important to us that not only they get the training, but then they get the experience and then they get the credential. And so they can be what we call day two ready. You come on the job, you understand how the organization works, and then day two, you're ready to go. And so I enjoyed that role so much because it allowed me to mentor cyber and IT, especially those individuals that wanted to take a technical track because maybe they wanted to be the CTO, of the Air Force, or if they wanted to take a leadership track, which they wanted maybe to be myself or my deputy. And
Mhm.
so I think that role too, while not technical, was very fulfilling and important for me to make sure that I had a strategy for making sure that we would have that next generation of cyber and IT. And then lastly, I did have the pleasure, the Secretary of the Air Force appointed me to lead the warrant officer effort. We brought back warrant officers to the Air Force. And so myself, along with the A6 community, that I'm ATC, and then of course down at Maxwell, it was very, Air University, it was very important that collectively we brought back warrant officers. And that is so key because having that technical expertise that also understood mission and having that different layer between, yes, we had technical sergeants, but warrant officers do something a little bit different. And so bringing that back was also one of the major initiatives that I like to say that I'm proud that I had the opportunity to lead on the behalf of the department.
Wonderful. A couple things I want to kind of follow up on there. One, it's a great thing that they brought the warrants back into the Air Force. I know most of my career was spent supporting Army, and I know like the cyber warrants in Army are usually super high speed, highly trained,
Mhm.
highly specialized, and always, again, technical expert and utmost professionals, right? The one of the challenges though you mentioned there, with the training and then the last thing is the retention. So I personally have seen where a lot of folks, while they're in uniform, they'll get selected to go to courses, to get the training, and we train them up. But then they reach their time, and then, everybody has that decision when they're in uniform to make the decision to recontract or to, transition into civilian life. And so the question I have is, what are the things that you see, and this is more of your opinion only, but what is the things that you would see or recommend for the future CIOs and the people in the different departments to consider if they were to watch this right now? What would you say? This is some initiatives, or this is my idea of how we could work better at the retention part, because we do get funding, we do get people trained up, but we want to be able to retain that talent as long as we possibly can, because we live in a world where at the end of the day, some people their goal is the make the most money they can, and that's something to be appreciated. So it's not the answer can't always be get more higher paying salaries. That's just not realistic. But from your perspective and your opinion, what it would be some solutions or some ideas that the leaders right now in government can should really start to think about.
And so, in my opinion, first of all, we're doing it. And if I could sum it up in one word, is flexibility. And we are flexible. And so, even while some may say possible, but having the ability, the change the retirement system because now I can leave the service and I can come back. So that flexibility in your career is important. I think we have programs that allow us to do partnerships with industry, and that's not just for military, that's for civilians as well, because I had several of my civilian those part of my civilian profession do education with industry. And so I think as we continue to be flexible, understanding that people have different times in their lives to do different things. When I
Absolutely
decide
right.
to, be a mother, or you decide, and even for the father as well, because it's not just the mother, that they have the flexibility to go do that and it not hurt their career. So I was excited when the uniform started to create those types of programs because not only did I serve, my husband served, he's a retired chief. I have a son in the Air Force right now. He's at Andrews Air Force Base. And so it's exciting for me to have that flexibility. And then now the civilian side with the DCWF, you hear the Defense Cyber Workforce Framework,
Mhm.
we now tie to some of that flexibility also to our civilian counterparts. One, when you're in a career field that has a high attrition rate, yes, money matters. But for some people, it's recognition that matters. So when you understand what motivates people to do something, you understand how to incentivize them based on that motivation. So again, if it's starting a family, you give them flexibility. If it is building wealth, you give them more money. If it's learning new skills, and you give them opportunities with education with industry. So I think there are a lot of programs for both the military and the civilian that allows this flexibility that I think is the key to retention. No one comes in, and maybe they do say, I'm going to be here for 20 years. But then there could be life things that happen that may change that, and they should have the flexibility to do that. So I'm very proud of the department for taking on some of those flexibility initiatives.
Well, I'm happy to hear that because you're absolutely right. If someone has the ability to do something else a while, and it's kind of like iron sharpens iron. If someone wants to go into the commercial sector for a few years, they're going to come, if then and they're allowed to come back in and continue working their years towards the retirement and service. that's a value add to me because they're going to bring that exposure and that knowledge and experience back with them. So I love that. I love that word flexibility. Again, when we usually think of government, we think of old institutions with just stone pillar walls and they're just rigid. But to hear the word flexibility, and you mentioned there are several programs that have been stood up. That's music to my ears. I think that that's a great direction to be taking things in. Venus, we could talk a lot about the experiences again with 30 years plus. I'm sure you got stories galore, but I do want to respect your time. So this is one of my most favorite questions I like to ask all my guests. And so the question goes is this: if we could get into like a time machine and go back to day one when a young Miss Goodwine said, I want to do IT cyber, what is that story and would you share it with us?
I will tell you, what's funny about that, Jim, is the decision was made for me. So let's go back
Okay.
to Airman Goodwine, who entered the Air Force in 1986 as an
Mhm.
airman, and I was a signals intelligence officer, not an officer. I was a signals intelligence analyst, forgive me. And I was at Goodfellow Air Force Base, and I did several tours. I ended up back at Goodfellow Air Force Base as an instructor. And at that time, I wanted to do what I came in the Air Force to do, and that was I wanted to get a degree. I applied for a program and I was accepted. It was called Bootstrap at the time. If you've been around a while, you know what the Bootstrap program is. And at that time, I had a staff sergeant, Kevin Lane, said, if you're going to go and get a degree, you should get your degree in IT. I was like, really? He said, oh, yeah. There are going to be times when you're going to go to the grocery store and he said at the time robots was going to check me out, but lo and behold, I'm checking myself out, right? Because he
Yeah.
wasn't thinking about AI. But because I went to a vocational technical school, I went to school to be a secretary. I could type 100 words a
Hmm.
minute. I was taking shorthand at 90 words a minute. I was going to do that.
90 words
But
a
then
minute
I
is
entered
pretty
the Air
good.
Force.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really good.
right. Yes. But then I entered the Air Force. I went in open general and I became, a signals analyst. It served me well, for the first 9.5 years of my career. But once I received my degree, I went to the University of Maryland, Go Terrapins, and received my computer and information science degree. And then I became commissioned. And once I commissioned as a comm officer at the time, circa 2009, they made the change to call us cyberspace operations. That's why I say the decision was almost made for me to get into
Hmm.
this cyberspace. But I will tell you, being dual persona for all this time. I served 26 years in the Air Force Reserve, not only enlisted, but again, then as an officer. And so when I wasn't in the reserves, my civilian career was around IT and then cyber. So the two played well together. And that is what has led to the success that I've had in my career. So my day one go all the way back. I thank him all the time. Thank you, Kevin, for telling me to do IT. And I did that. I took his advice. Thank you, Air Force, for moving me from a communications officer to cyber space. And then my first job as an executive, I was a CISO at the Department of Agriculture. And then, as you could say, the rest was history. But I have had some mentors along the way. Not only my first cyber role at USFK. I remember the '06 at the time, the J635, Colonel Carlton, he was the J635, and we established the first joint cyber center in USFK. I came back to the States after relocating from overseas, and I met Bill Bender, I met Bill Marion, I met Lauren Knotzenberger, I met, Essie Miller. I can just name a host of individuals, but I want to name Scott Jack for sure because he's the first person I met. And I'm telling you that because I've had mentors, influencers, and people that I have admired, that I have also mimicked their career, and it has helped me in my career, and I now pay it forward. So I always take the time to definitely give back to what was given to me, to that person that was in the room advocating for me, and I didn't even know it. Pete Kim was a CISO. I worked for him in the Air Force, and he gave me some of the tough jobs to do while I was in that role. So, yes, my day one is a good story, and I'm excited to the way that my story ended. And I will, at this point, now I'm ready to transition to
New
my
chapter.
chapter 3. I'm excited
Chapter
about
three.
it.
I like that. Chapter three. Many more chapters to go. Um,
Yes.
in your career, has there been a big challenge that you had faced, and in that challenge where you thought you may fail, could you speak to, what that challenge, an example of a challenge that was really big to you at the time, and then what it took to overcome it, move around it, adapt, etc.
Oh, absolutely. So I could name a couple of them. When I moved to Japan, it was because I was a military spouse. Like as I mentioned, my husband was a chief master sergeant. Um, and so we got orders to go to Okinawa, Japan. And at the
Okinawa.
time
Ah,
we got those orders, I was on my way to being successful with Lockheed Martin as a leader. And so when I moved to Japan, I gave up that job. I took a leave of absence from Lockheed Martin. I didn't know that I was going to ultimately live in Japan for 10 years. I thought I was only going to do 3 and come back. But the challenge I encountered was when I found employment with the Marine Corps G6 on Camp Foster in Okinawa. My teammates and the team that I led were Japanese nationals. And so I didn't think that I could lead a multinational, multicultural organization because I was new into the federal government. But wow, did that turn out to not be true? Because those things that I mentioned, the coaches and the mentors that I had. Fast forward, I left that role and became an acquisition professional responsible for transitioning the Navy Marine Corps intranet, the NMCI, to what
okay.
they
An
call next
MCI,
gen.
yeah.
And that was tough because I was the overseas professional responsible, and I had to transition Germany and Japan, the island and mainland. And so that was challenging for me because if anyone that, you say NMCI, they say it's a 4 letter word. But that was a huge contract that had been
It
in
was
place for
very
10
big.
years. And then to move away from that contract, we ended up putting a bridge contract in place. But that was a challenge. And I overcame that because I realized that there's no I in team.
Hmm.
I started to rely on my other teammates, although they weren't overseas, they could still help me. Here's an example. The requirements for skills in Japan to hire in Japan is different than in Germany. And
Hmm.
not being in Germany and having lived in Germany, that turned out to be a challenge. We had to do contract mods and all that to meet that because there's a standard of education and pay in
Hmm.
Germany that I was not aware of because I was in Japan. And so while I had a large geographical responsibility, it turned out to be such a challenge for that reason. But I learned how to overcome it because I recognized that I didn't have to solve the problem alone.
Hmm.
The other, if you think about something else, with another challenge I think I had, believe it or not, I was working for the Marine Corps. I worked for a boss that didn't support my career aspirations, and I won't call names, but I did name him the diminisher because when I said, hey, one day, I'm a GS 14, I'm a GS 15, or NH4 is what we called it. I would like to be an executive, a member of the senior executive service. And he said to me, good luck with that. Oh my. Not only was that heartbreaking, but then it turned out that it fueled me. Like I was going to make sure that I did what I needed to do because
Hmm.
I knew that I could have that opportunity, regardless of someone trying to tell me that I couldn't. So really, those are some of the things I think about when you think of some of the challenges, not only, career-wise, professionally or leadership, but also personally. Those were some of the challenges I had to overcome.
I love that story, how it's almost like, he was shooting the lightning at you, but you was able to keto or capture that lightning and let it fuel you. I joke with a lot of my colleagues when they say, what propels you to do a lot of things you do? And I'll say first spite, but you have to take that hate, and instead of, letting it just sit on you and burn you and fester in you, you just got to Aikido it into something that fuels you. So I love that you did that. Thank you for sharing that story. The Diminisher, I love that name. They should make a film series on that. Like the, yeah, what's the Denzel one? It's called Oh goodness, I just had the equalizer, but this
Mm.
one would be the diminisher. So we could definitely continue talking tech, but I do want to take a moment in the podcast. I call it my moment of levity. So where we take a pause on talking shop and technical and IT cyber stuff, and we just have a few rapid fire questions that are purely for fun. There's no right or wrong answer, so it's just my moment of levity. So if you'll humor me, I'm going to shoot you with some questions. Whatever the first answer comes to mind, just blurt it out, and there's no right or wrong answer. So. You ready?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
We're gonna come out the gate with is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes.
Okay, hot dog's a sandwich. All right. Now this one splits the room for IT cyber folks. All right. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Which version of Star Wars or which trilogy of Star Wars is your favorite?
Oh, well, now I'm not a Star Wars family, but I mean, if you ask me the two, I mean, I'm not really a sci-fi girl but you didn't tell me to say either. You said I had to choose one or the
Choose
other.
one or the other. Okay. All
So,
right. That's fair. Cake or pie?
ooh, pie, sweet
Pie.
potato pie, because I'm
Sweet
good
potato
at it.
pie. Hot or cold sweet potato pie?
Warm with ice cream.
Warm with ice cream. Okay. What has been your most favorite book of all time that you've read, and what was the last book that you've read?
Well, of course, the Bible. I mean, I love the
Good.
66 books there. I continually read it. That's the one book that I know that I read continually over and over, and I also read it every day. So, yes,
So
that
it's
is my
also
most
the most
favorite
recent
book.
one. All right. All
Yes,
right.
yeah.
What
But
is a
no, but I also will tell you when I'm not reading the Bible, really. But I also have different books that I like to read around CIO. I take pride in every day. I try and learn different things, either professionally, physically, mentally, or whatever. And so I have an app I call Blinkist. And so Blinkist gives me different little snapshots of books that I could read. And some are like Just Get Started. I won't remember the authors by heart, but the Blinkist comes up every day. So I have the opportunity to read several books, in a week, at least the Cliff Notes version. And so I like that idea.
so going back to the Bible, is there a particular book of the Bible that is one of your favorites?
Yes, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans that I have for you, plans for you to prosper. Yeah, and I can go on and on. Yes,
Okay, so
Jeremiah
Jeremiah.
29:11.
Um, I know, being an executive advisory board member and so many other things that you're involved in, and our day jobs and our lives can get very demanding on our time. But a lot of us professionals do try to make time for nonprofit, volunteer, charity work and things that are, organizations that are doing good in the world, and or just causes that are near and dear to our heart. So the goal of this question is there such an organization that you would like to shine a light on that talk about their mission, what they're doing? And then, of course, if you give me their socials and website, I'll make sure they're in the description below.
So the Boys and Girls Club of America. You can find one locally wherever you are. I grew up going to the Boys and Girls Club. I made lots of friends at the Boys and Girls Club. So in my chapter 3, that's where I'll spend my time. And specifically because I will be there in their spaces encouraging that underrepresented community to take part in STEM, not just girls, not just boys, but a combination to take part in STEM because we definitely need more STEM professionals and we need more STEM professionals of color, if you allow me to call it out specifically. And so,
Mhm.
yes, join your Boys and Girls Club, give back your time, help them to understand and not be afraid. Never tell a young girl that she's not good at math,
Mhm.
right? Encourage her. So use your time to go back because our youth are our future, and we have to be like some of the other nations and start young. We need to
Yes.
start in the pre-K and the kindergarten. We can't wait and give them technology at an
Mhm.
older age because we're afraid of the big bad internet. And so my goal is to go into that organization and leverage all of my IT transformation and cybersecurity acumen and really educate them so they won't be afraid, but they'll be more knowledgeable about how to use the technology and then guide them towards STEM. So if you have an opportunity to contribute, please if you just do Google on your Girls and Boys Club of America, you will find one near you. Give back your time.
I love the focus on STEM. I was a single parent to two daughters. That's why I have all this white in my beard for 17 years of their lives before they went off to college. And I actually wrote a book series that's sold now in 60 plus countries. I won 14 awards for this series, but it focused on a girl character that was a composite of both my daughters. And I was really supportive of there was an Always campaign several years ago that aired during a Super Bowl that was called Like a Girl. And it had like a young girl throw like a girl, run like a girl. And it's such a powerful message. And, as a father of two daughters, I want them to be in a world where they have all the ability to pursue mathematics and science and technology, etc. And, I've had some wonderful guests like Dr. Wynn Masters from MITRE, double masters in mathematics. It's just amazing that we need more both men and women in STEM because that's we solve the big problems of the world, right? It's through science, through leveraging technology, etc. So I love that focus of yours with the Boys and Girls Club to focus on STEM. We don't have nearly enough of it, and you're right when you mention other countries. We do need to take our education game up several notches because we have to still remain competitive for the future. Um,
Yes.
the what is I know you're saying chapter three, but what's next? Like in the next year, if we was to say, hey, are we going to see you at some conferences speaking, keynoting, or is there a book maybe on the horizon? Is there something that you could share right now with us of what's in the next, chapter looking like?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the things I said at my retirement, that people always ask me, what are you going to do next? And I will tell you, first it was rest. And so I did that. And then I was going to take a river cruise on the Danube River. So I did that for
Oh,
12 days. And
nice.
then I told them that I was going to write a book. So I'm in the process. I have the table of contents. That's a start.
Hey,
I was
writing
going
it
to
down.
start a podcast in which I have my podcast is titled There to Hear, THERE, the number two here. You'll my YouTube channel will be live. I put a couple commercials and teasers out. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see that I put a teaser out that coming soon is my podcast. And There to Hear is really about my leadership journey because I want to share not only my journey, but bring on guests that can share their journey. And to your point, some of the challenges to get into the right rooms or to
Hmm.
reach your goal. Because one thing I always say is my mantra is stay ready so you don't have to get ready. So when that
Oh,
opportunity
that's really
becomes
good.
available, you are ready. And so that's what the podcast is about. And then besides doing that, and of course, I've been an adjunct faculty member at the Northern Virginia College, teaching IT and cyber since 2015. I continue to do that. And yes, I can go to the four-year university. I choose specifically the two-year school because what I find there often are some adults either making career changes or really just going back to school. And so it allowed me, they have a special place in my heart when you are working full time and going to school at night, because that's what I did. And so I teach there, and I've been doing that for a while, so I'll continue. But professionally, yes, I am now my first board, Chorus. So Chorus AI, you can look up that software. It's a game changer, IL5 solution, not doing a shameless plug, but it is game changing. So you can look that up. It's on my LinkedIn website as well. But then I'm also doing some consulting and some strategic advising to different companies that really want to understand not only just how to sell to the government, but how do you get through this risk management framework
Yeah.
process to do business with the
Now
government.
we're at Rev
And so
5.
really,
Yeah.
yeah. So now that I'm just trying to coach on how to do that. And so my plate is full.
Hmm.
And so no, I'm not retired yet. I am on chapter 3 and I am having the time of my life.
Well, I love to hear that. The all those links you mentioned, from yes, the Boys and Girls Club, any of
Yes.
those links and anything else that you want to send me, please send it to me. I'm going to put it in the description below to save you folks that are watching this right now. The Google search, you can just click the description, and everything that Venus has talked about will be down there below. We've reached now the end. For all my guests this season, I give you the final word. So when I, turn it over to you, you can speak about tech, cyber, AI. You can talk about whatever you like. You can talk about your trip up the Danube. But the final word is yours, Miss Goodwine.
I will say time is the one currency that we spend without knowing the balance. Use your time wisely. Spend your time on things that matter. Thank you, Jim. It's been a pleasure to be here and really share some of my own thoughts with you. They are my own, but I really appreciate this platform. Thank you, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much for being on the Top Cyber Pro podcast.